Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Hamza Rifat and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned Indian atrocities for denying veteran Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani a proper funeral. Gilani's family wanted him to be buried at the Martyrs Cemetery in Srinagar, but the occupation authorities rejected the request. He was then laid to rest near his residence under strict military siege, and only close relatives were allowed to attend the funeral. The U.S. military says there is a possibility that they coordinate with the Taliban in their shared battle against ISIS Khorasan. Top U.S. General Mark Milley made these remarks alongside Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in their first press conference since the last troops left Afghanistan. Milley said it's unclear whether the Taliban changed from the ruthless group that they once were. The Yemeni army says at least 43 Houthis and 22 pro-government troops have been killed in renewed fighting for the strategic city of Marib. The military said the clashes erupted when the Houthis attacked pro-government positions south of the city. Meanwhile, pro-Houthi media says the Arab coalition launched dozens of airstrikes after the group captured a strategic district in Marib. Moscow says U.S. military assistance to Ukraine could make Kiev behave unpredictably in its conflict with Russian-backed separatists. In a statement, the Kremlin said it regretted the fact of U.S.-Ukrainian friendship in opposing Moscow. This comes after U.S. President Joe Biden offered Ukraine $60 million in new security assistance to help deal with Russia. India has reported the biggest single-day rise in COVID-19 infections, with over 47,000 testing positive overnight. Mexico's daily COVID-19 cases have spiked again as it logged over 1,100 fatalities and more than 17,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 89 more people lost their lives to the virus and more than 4,100 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 218 million, while the death toll is more than 4.54 million. Details after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. And now for the news in detail. In occupied Kashmir, Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned Indian authorities for denying veteran Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani a proper funeral. Gilani's family wanted him to be buried at the Martyrs Cemetery in Srinagar, but the occupation authorities rejected the request. He was then laid to rest near his residence under strict military siege, and only close relatives were allowed to attend the funeral.
Sayyid Ali Gilani was a staunch opponent of India's occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. He stood for Kashmiri's struggle for their right to self-determination. Indian authorities have imposed a security clampdown in the occupied valley following his death. Troops put up barbed wire and barricades on roads leading to Gilani's house. Police said no one in the Kashmir Valley will be allowed to leave their homes, and only relatives will be allowed to visit the residence of Sayyid Ali Gilani. Thousands of security forces are immediately deployed, and mobile internet services are cut across the area.
Now, Pakistan is observing a mourning day over the demise of Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani. President Arif Alvi was among the first to pay tribute to the freedom fighter.
Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi said, "Occupied Kashmir has lost the most iconic leader today," and prayed for the strength for Gilani's family. Prime Minister Imran Khan said, Gilani had struggled all his life for his people and their right to self-determination. He suffered incarceration and torture by the occupying Indian state, but remained resolute. Gilani's lifelong sacrifices Pakistan's army chief said Gilani's lifelong sacrifices and struggle symbolize the indomitable resolve of Kashmiris against Indian occupation. General Qamar Javed Bajwa said the leader's mission will live on until the people of occupied Kashmir win their right to self-determination. Mishal Hussain Malik, human rights activist and the wife of Kashmiri leader Yasin Malik, also lauded Gilani's lifelong struggle for the people of occupied Kashmir.
He was a man of principles, a man who believed in steadfastness, who believed in liberty and freedom, and never did he for a moment stir away from his committed stance of liberation. And today, after losing him, we are all in a state of despair and mourning, and I pray to Allah Almighty to grant him the highest positions in Jannah, in heaven. And inshallah ta'ala, a day will come when his sacrifices will bear fruit. Though he left us too soon, with an unfinished dream of the free Kashmir, but a day will come inshallah, when all these struggles will bear fruit. But we will forever miss you, and we will forever follow the path and the guidance that you've given us. You are that beacon of light, that beacon of hope, and beacon of guidance. May Allah Ta'ala give patience to your family to bear this colossal, irreparable loss.
Pakistan's flag will fly at half-mast today as the nation observes a day of official mourning.
Now we have with us Dr. Sayyid Mujahid Gilani, grandson of the late Sayyid Ali Gilani and nephew of Kashmiri leader Sayyida Asiya Andrabi. Dr. Sayyid Mujahid Gilani, thank you for your time. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us here on Indus News. My first question, sir, to you is that Indian occupied authorities have snatched the body of Kashmiri leader Sayyid Ali Gilani, who happens to be your grandfather, from his family. How do you see this barbaric act?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, this needs to be understood that the last rituals of any human being, be it a Muslim or any other religion, is kind of a human right. And not only human rights, this is considered to be something that is for any human being. It's quite natural to perform the last human rituals of a deceased person. For us, a person, Sayyid Ali Gilani, for us, he's a family member. But for the whole of the nation, for the Kashmiri people, he was an iconic symbol. And this is very important to understand that it was not only us, the family, who wanted to be present in the funeral, but also the rest of the Kashmiri people who wanted to be present in the funeral and perform his last rituals. For us, this is quite hurting. But I believe for the free world, this is another opportunity to speak up for Kashmir, to speak up for the human rights violations that the Indian authorities are committing in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Absolutely. And when we speak about Indian atrocities, New Delhi has deployed large contingents of police and paramilitary troopers outside Sayyid Ali Gilani's home. What resistance New Delhi can now face in occupied Kashmir after his death and house arrest?
See, what is important is that Sayyid Ali Gilani was a very beloved leader of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. For us, he's a family, true, but for the Indian authorities, he's kind of a name, an icon who can actually create havoc in the Indian authorities. And the most important thing is, the most important reason that Indian authorities stole the dead body of Sayyid Ali Gilani and buried him in the dead of the night was actually to avoid congregation of the people. The Indian authorities wanted the people to stay away from the dead body, to stay away from a funeral that could have actually resulted in more than lakhs and lakhs of people gathering together and chanting the same slogan that Sayyid Ali Gilani has been chanting his whole life. The most important thing at this point in time is that every Kashmiri must stand together, every Kashmiri must stand united and speak up against this Indian atrocity.
Absolutely. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So how much do you think the Kashmiris' movement for freedom will be affected after Gilani's death?
See, the most important thing is, once again, that Sayyid Ali Gilani has been a leader. And a leader is somebody who actually trickles down whatever he has into the newer generation. And the newer generation at this point in time in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir knows what to do. They know their vision. They know their destination. And the slogan that Sayyid Ali Gilani has been chanting, that "Hum Pakistani hain, ye Pakistan hamara hai," is the clearest of all visions that he could have actually trickled down to the newer generation. For us, yes, we have lost somebody who was very, very, very dear to us. But for the Kashmir cause, this is going to be a new movement.
Absolutely. And when you talk about solidarity with Pakistan, our Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced a day of national mourning. How do you see this country's support for the Kashmiri people?
See, one of the most important things, once again, is that Pakistan needs to stand with Kashmir in these times of tribulation. The most important thing, once again, is Sayyid Ali Gilani has been talking about Pakistan all his life. He has considered Pakistan as a symbol, an icon, an emblem. And the thing is that Sayyid Ali Gilani, now he's no more. But the Pakistani state needs to organize a national level funeral, be it in the Faisal Masjid, to be chaired by the Prime Minister Imran Khan, be it the Badshahi Mosque at Lahore. But we, the people in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, cannot perform the funeral, cannot gather over there and pay the last homage to the great leader. This needs to be done in Pakistan, in this free atmosphere where lakhs and lakhs of people can gather together and pay homage and the last rituals of the greatest leader that we had in Kashmir.
Absolutely, and I can reassure you that Pakistan will continue to stand in solidarity with the Kashmiri cause, and these condolences would actually be followed up with greater advocacy and promotion of Kashmiri rights. Now, Dr. Syed Mujahid Gilani, thank you so much for talking to me on Indus News. Now, the U.S. military says it is a possibility that they coordinate with the Taliban in their shared battle against ISIS Khorasan. Top U.S. General Mark Milley made these remarks alongside Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in their first press conference since the last troop left Afghanistan. More in this report.
Despite the coordination with Taliban during evacuations from Kabul, U.S. officials sought to downplay the possibility of working with the group. Milley said going forward, the cooperation is possible, but it is unclear whether the Taliban change from the ruthless group that they once were. Secretary Austin also said he would not want to make any predictions on future cooperation. However, earlier, the Democratic chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks, said the U.S. recognition of the Taliban is possible. The European Union official also said Brussels will need to engage with the Taliban, but it will not rush into formally recognizing the group. Meanwhile, British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said the UK had been caught out and surprised by the scale and speed of the fall of Kabul. Raab said an assessment by the Joint Intelligence Committee indicated that Kabul would remain safe until next year. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's new rulers are expected to announce a new government today. Yesterday, a member of the Taliban's Cultural Commission, Anamullah Samangani, said the new government has been finalized. He confirmed that the group's supreme leader, Hibatullah Akhundzada, will be the top authority in the country. Samangani also reported heavy casualties in Panjshir on the Taliban as well as resistance side. Earlier, senior Taliban leader Amir Khan Muttaqi called on the rebels to put down their weapons. Meanwhile, former Afghan Vice President Amrullah Saleh said the Panjshir resistance will defend the rights of all Afghan citizens. This comes as the UN humanitarian coordinator in Afghanistan warned that the country could face a food crisis within a month, leaving 1 out of 3 people hungry.
Now, reporting in conflict zones tends to be an extremely cumbersome and tedious task, and the ability for women especially to go into these areas and try and make sure that detailed reports regarding on-ground realities are actually presented, which is beyond mainstream media, that is in itself an achievement. Now, we're joined by Sumaira Khan, who is a special correspondent for Indus News. She's been in Kabul for roughly about 2 weeks, and she has been following all the events from the ISIS attack at the airport to, in general, whatever has actually unfolded over there. Sumaira, thank you so much for joining me on Indus News. Now, my first question is a very simple one. How was your experience as a woman reporting in a conflict zone such as Afghanistan, and what kind of on-ground realities can you actually tell us, which might not necessarily be picked up in the mainstream media?
I think first of all, it was always a tremendous experience for me to cover the conflict area, conflict zone, be it any kind of condition. And since I started my career with the coverage of a conflict zone, and it was back in 2004, and I was covering Mir Ali, North Waziristan, and Pakistan was preparing for to launch one of the biggest military operations, Operation Al-Mizan, that was being conceived those days. And Mir Ali and North Waziristan was believed to be the hardcore, the most hardcore area, troubled area in Pakistan's tribal area. So I think I started with that. So now it becomes kind of another assignment for me to cover another conflict zone. But yes, the exclusivity of this time's assignment was, it was for Indus, one of my very own channel and beloved channel, and second, it was out of country. So it was my first conflict area from like outside Pakistan. So this brings exclusivity to this assignment. And if we talk about what I covered, you can't believe it's. I think if we start debating about it, it will be, I think we need more programs to discuss that, because we had a hell of issues to be covered over there and to be covered with ground realities. What I the element I missed in the reporting from a few of our own channels from Pakistan and Western media, I would say most probably the Western media was the one that was not depicting the entire picture that should have been depicted the way it deserves. Specifically, they kept on showing the Kabul International Airport the whole time. It was the hub of news for everyone. Like, I won't name those channels, but they were fixed over there. They were totally fixated, obsessed with the scenario in the outskirts of Kabul International Airports. That made me a little uneasy that if we talk about unbiased journalism, if we talk about ground realities, if we talk about covering the war zone, then it's not just covering the Kabul International Airport where more than 25,000 people used to gather across all 7 gates of this most disturbed and most discussed airport right now. Still is. So one of my colleagues from a member of Western media, I won't name his channel, but he's a very senior journalist over there, and he did say that yes, we keep hearing the news you share with your channel, and because we used to cover mostly from the rooftop whenever it was a security hazard for us, so there were chunks allocated for all the media personnel on the rooftop of our place where we were staying. And he said that yes, when you talk about burqa, when you talk about the dress code, when you talk about, because I guess I was the first one who interviewed a Taliban commander on ground. Right. And when I asked him that, are you sure you are that strict about women the way you are being portrayed? And he said, no. We don't have any issues with their faces covered or with their heads covered. We did not ask, we did not demand from any woman to cover their face. So that was the first lead from Indus News to all the Western media as well. And then they paid a little heed to at least cover the ground realities. And yes, they are not asking any women to cover their faces.
Now, which brings me to the next question. Have the Taliban changed their orientation or their ideological proclivities based on the interview that you had with this Taliban official? Have they really changed? Because a lot of, what's actually being purported or portrayed in the media is that, the Taliban are more malleable, they're more, oriented towards a more secular liberal view. Is that really the case? I
think I would say maybe it hurts a specific group of people in Pakistan as well, but yes, they have changed. Earlier, if we talk about the regime back in 2001 that was thwarted by the American invasion, they did not even watch television. The other day when I was speaking to one of you guys in the studio and I was in Kabul, they never watched television. They were hardcore. They were hardcore in eliminating people. They were hardcore in giving Sharia punishments. Now, we totally see an entirely changed Taliban regime in Kabul and Afghanistan. Now, just a little example. Sorry. They have been controlling Afghanistan now for at least 16 days. I was in Afghanistan after the fall of Kabul for 14 days. Today, it's the 15th day that I've come back.
Today's the 15th day, right.
And the crime rate comes to almost zero. There is no killing, there is no abduction, there is no extortion, there is no theft, there is no robbery. There is no car lifting. By the way, car lifting used to be the main hobby of the Kabulites.
Right. And
Sometimes
it was
they would do it
ubiquitous all over when the Ashraf Ghani government was in power.
So even they arrested imposters, those who were launching this kind of criminal activities in their name. They arrested them, they recovered every belonging of the Kabulites, and then they invited people to come and recognize your things and just get it, because it's not us who were doing that. And that's exactly was the case when Kabul fell.
Right.
The night of 14th and 15th August. They were waiting for the results of negotiations from Arg Palace, where President Ashraf Ghani was seemingly in negotiations with the delegation of Taliban who went there, and they did not even enter the Arg Palace, and he just left. And with him leaving Afghanistan, every security personnel, they left their checkposts in Kabul and they left the city abandoned, and there was no one to take care of the sensitive installations, including, people should know that, including the UN agencies' offices.
Right.
So they were asked to enter because they were totally stationed at Wardag, Logar, Parwan, Paghman, and Laghman, which is adjacent to Kabul, and it's Ghazni. So they were stationed in the outskirts. They were not moving into Kabul. They were not taking it forcibly, militarily, but they were then instructed that there is a grave danger to women and children, because there is no police, there is no security personnel at the pickets. So the city was in grave danger. But Taliban, they were reluctant to go in because they were deeming it might be a trap for them, because Americans were there, thousands of troops were there. They did not leave Kabul on ground. So even they were reluctant. It might be a kind of a trap for us. So, but when they entered the city, they took control of the city. They just managed all the law and order situation until the moment I was leaving. Trust me, this road used to be hazardous for every Pakistani traveling on this road. A road from Kabul that goes through Nangarhar, Jalalabad, Laghman specifically. The checkposts, those come to Sarobi market, and there is a point of there is a beautiful dam over there, Naglu Dam.
Okay.
So people used to get robbed over there, literally. It's a kind of a rough road through the mountainous terrain. But right now, you just travel through nights and days, and there is no problem for you. So this was the first-hand experience of...
first-hand experience of it as well. So this is absolutely valuable, all these experiences that you're actually sharing. And this is what the mainstream media needs to report more about, as to what the on-ground realities are all about. Sumaira Khan, thank you so much for joining me here on Indus News. You can catch this segment tonight on Newswire at 10 p.m. And we will get more from Sumaira Khan later on, whenever developments in Afghanistan actually unfold. Now, for more on Afghan affairs, we're also joined by Fahad Masood, international security analyst. Thank you, Fahad, for your time. Now, my question is that the U.S. military says it is a possibility that they coordinate with the Taliban in their shared battle against ISIS Khorasan. Do you think this potential coalition would be effective and last strategically?
I believe it's a possibility. Considering the timeline where we stand today, it is critical for Taliban to gain acceptability from the international arena. There can be no greater possibility or greater chance for them to do this if they align themselves with the Americans. And ISIS Khorasan is a mutual enemy as we understand it now. So it will be a win-win for both. The Biden administration wants an exit from the situation that they've gotten themselves into, and they want this thing to go away. So it will be a win-win both ways. Yes, it is possible. Long term, I have my doubts on that.
All right, fair enough. Now, the Taliban have also launched their operation against the National Resistance Front in the Panjshir Valley. How much resistance the Taliban fighters can actually face there? How much can they actually resist this onslaught?
Resistance. Well, Panjshir is a cupped valley. It is closed from one end, open from the other. The Masood clan and everybody who is there, let me remind you that it is not only the clan itself. The remnants of NDS, the remnants of RAW and ISIS Khorasan are mixed into against a mutual enemy, which is the Taliban. So they are looking forward and they will continue to forge resistance. How long will it take? I don't believe too long, because being a valley which is close from one end, they will not have any support that's coming across from the international players, as well as we've discussed before. Taliban and the Biden administration are looking to form a coalition against this Panjshir Valley. So a reality is it may take, in my humble opinion, nothing more than a week. And Masood himself, he's mentioned very candidly the only way he will admit or lower weapons against the Taliban is one condition only, that there is a coalition government that takes place at Kabul. Taliban are already willing for it, so I believe it will simmer down sooner than later.
Right, right. Fair enough. Now, as Afghanistan was also being taken over by the Taliban, Russia started, and it's actually started its military drills, along with other neighboring countries as well. What do you think the purpose of these military drills are, and how can they benefit Moscow?
Oh, well, they are aligned as per timeline with this Kabul exit of the West and the Taliban takeover. But I would rather say the Russians are looking to secure their borders. They want to ensure that they don't run into a problem of having too many refugees coming across, and in the bargain, ensuring also that there is military presence there. So they are ensuring their own security. I don't believe there's any alignment or any negative intent, as we call it, for that move. Putin has mentioned on different occasions that they will be willing to admit, or for that matter, look into the possibility of having Taliban as the primary points of contact in Afghanistan, and that is how it is. So I don't believe there is too much of an issue there.
Right, right. Thank you so much for joining me on Indus News. More news after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back. Now, the Yemeni army says it has killed at least 43 Houthi rebels in renewed fighting for the strategic city of Marib. A military official said 22 pro-government troops were also killed and 50 others injured. He said the clashes erupted when the Houthis attacked pro-government positions south of the city. The official noted the rebels made progress despite losing dozens of fighters in coalition airstrikes. Meanwhile, pro-Houthi media says the Arab coalition launched airstrikes on multiple areas of the group in Marib. It said the raids follow Houthis' complete recapture of the Rabah district, located south of the Marib province. Rabah's capture will cut off the coalition forces' supply routes linking Al-Baida and Marib provinces. Now, Moscow says U.S. military aid to Ukraine could make Kiev behave unpredictably in its conflict with Russian-backed separatists. This comes after U.S. President Joe Biden offered Ukraine $60 million in new security assistance to help deal with Russia. In a statement, the Kremlin said it regretted the fact that U.S.-Ukrainian friendship in opposing Moscow. Earlier, Biden met his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, at the White House. He assured Zelensky of Washington's firm commitment to Kiev's sovereignty and territorial integrity against Moscow's aggression. The two sides also discussed Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which Ukraine opposes. Meanwhile, Zelensky said Biden personally supports Ukraine's membership of NATO. France and Germany have urged Iran to return rapidly to negotiations to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. In a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, French Foreign Minister underlined the importance of an immediate resumption of talks. A French Foreign Ministry statement said Jean-Yves Le Drian repeated his concern on Iran's nuclear activities. Iran's Foreign Minister said America's illegal measures and Europe's inaction on it caused unfavorable situations surrounding the talks. Earlier, Germany also raised pressure on Tehran, asking it to resume talks as soon as possible. The seventh round of the negotiations was halted for the presidential elections and a subsequent change of administration in Iran. Earlier this week, Iran's foreign minister said the talks might resume in 2 to 3 months. Israeli forces have wounded a number of anti-blockade Palestinian protesters in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian media said the soldiers fired live rounds and high-velocity gas bombs at protesters near the border fence. It said dozens of protesters also suffered the effects of tear gas inhalation, in addition to cuts and bruises. In the West Bank, illegal Israeli settlers, backed by the police, stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Palestinians suffocated on tear gas as Israeli forces resorted to violence during a raid on towns in Jenin city. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv said America's plan to reopen its consulate in Jerusalem is a bad idea and could destabilize the Israeli government. The consulate located in occupied East Jerusalem has long served as an autonomous office that oversees American-Palestinian diplomatic relations. India has reported over 47,000 new COVID-19 cases, its biggest single-day rise in 2 months, while Mexico logged near 1,200 daily deaths and more than 17,000 infections. Globally, the coronavirus death toll is over 4.54 million, while the caseload has surpassed 218 million. More in this report.
A new study has shown that being fully vaccinated against COVID-19 not only cuts the risk of catching it, but also of an infection turning into long COVID. It shows that in the minority of people who get COVID despite 2 jabs, the odds of developing symptoms lasting longer than 4 weeks are cut by 50%. But unfortunately, the gaps in vaccination rates in rich and poor countries continue to widen. Amid that, a new report suggests the US has thrown away at least 15.1 million doses of vaccine since March 1st. Meanwhile, Cuba says it plans to vaccinate children aged 2 to 18 with its domestically developed vaccine. In Europe, Spain says it has achieved its goal for August to fully vaccinate 70% of its population.
We have more than 33 million, to be exact 33.3 million people fully vaccinated. We have not yet reached the final goal, but obviously this is a very important intermediate goal that means we have a broad vaccination coverage, and that puts Spain as a world reference.
The United Kingdom says about 500,000 severely immunosuppressed people in the country will be offered a 3rd vaccine dose. This comes as the European Centre for Disease Prevention said there is no urgent need of booster doses to fully vaccinated people. The World Health Organization also said well-vaccinated countries should prioritize COVAX over booster shots.
First, we call on countries that have contracted high volumes of vaccines to swap near-term delivery schedules with COVAX and the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, or AVAT. Second, we call on vaccine manufacturers to immediately prioritize and fulfill their contracts to COVAX and AVAT, and to provide regular, clear supply forecasts.
The WHO has launched a global data hub in Berlin to analyze information on emerging pandemic threats, filling the gaps exposed by COVID-19. Meanwhile, Moderna says it is working with Japan to recall 3 vaccine batches. Earlier, it was revealed that contaminants found in vials were particles of stainless steel. However, the Japanese Health Ministry said it did not expect that this would pose health risks. In Australia, doctors warn the hospitals are not ready to cope with the government's reopening plans, even with higher vaccination rates.
Now, in Pakistan, the coronavirus has claimed 89 more lives over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has reached 25,978. The ministry said more than 4,100 tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the caseload has exceeded 1.16 million, while over 1,048,000 have recovered. Nearly 92,000 people are currently suffering from the disease in Pakistan. The ministry says more than 4,700 of them are in critical condition. Meanwhile, the number of fully vaccinated people in the country has surpassed 18 million. At least 4 civilians have been killed in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo when militants ambushed a convoy and set fire to the vehicles. Authorities said around 80 people were taken as hostages in an attack on a convoy of about 100 vehicles. They said the convoy was traveling with army protection on the road between the cities of Beni and Butembo. The said army has freed more than 50 of the hostages in Ituri province, and operations are currently underway to recover the remaining captives. They also said a Ugandan terrorist group named Allied Democratic Forces, the ADF, carried out the attack. Staying with Africa, Nigeria, gunmen have kidnapped 73 students after storming a high school in northwestern state of Zamfara. In a statement, the police said rescue teams are working with the military to try to release the students. Officials said nighttime travel restrictions were imposed in the state and schools were temporarily closed. This is the latest incident in a spree of mass abductions in the region. Kidnapping for ransom by armed gangs locally known as bandits has become a grim trend in northwestern and central Nigeria. More than 1,000 students have also been abducted this year alone. More of them were later released. China has warned the United States that their strained relations could undermine the mutual efforts against global warming. Foreign Minister Wang Yi made the remarks during a virtual meeting with U.S. climate envoy John Kerry. He said cooperation on climate change cannot be separated from the broader relationship. Wang called on Washington to take steps to improve ties. He added that the U.S. should stop regarding China as a threat and an adversary. For his part, Washington's climate envoy encouraged Beijing to do more to reduce emissions. In a statement, the State Department said Kerry affirmed American commitment to cooperate with the world against the climate crisis. In America, at least 6 people have died due to harsh weather conditions from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. The governors of New York and New Jersey declared a state of emergency as record-breaking rains lashed the East Coast. Officials say the storm spawned at least 1 tornado and caused heavy flooding. Authorities in the New York City suspend all train services due to severe weather, trapping commuters stuck between stations. The city's mayor, Bill de Blasio, told the people to stay off roads and subways. Over in New Jersey, a catastrophic tornado ripped apart at least 9 homes in the community of Mullica Hill in the state. Meanwhile, the National Hurricane Center has warned that another storm, Larry, has strengthened into a hurricane over the eastern Atlantic. It says it could intensify further into a major hurricane by Friday night. Now, staying with the United States, the Caldor fire in California has left the resort town of Lake Tahoe unscathed as flames crept on towards Nevada. President Joe Biden has approved a declaration of emergency in California and ordered federal assistance to boost the firefighting efforts. The fire has charred more than 204,000 acres of drought-parched timber in California. In all, it has forced an estimated 50,000 people to flee and destroyed at least 729 structures. Most of them are single-family dwellings. Meanwhile, 34,800 more buildings have been listed as threatened throughout this fire zone. Now, in Egypt's new capital, residents will use smart cards and apps to unlock doors and make payments. They will also be able to surf the web on public Wi-Fi beamed from lampposts. What more Egypt has planned for this tech leap? Let's take a look in this report. Egypt's smart city design is a world away from parts of the existing sprawling capital, where creaking infrastructure lacks modern facilities. The city is built from scratch in the desert, called the new administrative capital, and is designed to hold 6.5 million residents. Officials say advanced technology systems will help reduce waste by detecting leaks or faults and by allowing residents to keep an eye on consumption.
We have the most modern applications for managing, for example, a criminal case. So, for example, when there is something going on and we have information saying there is a car of a certain color, that is an SUV, for example, that was there, we will be able to find that car within the administrative capital and know where it was, where it traveled and everything.
Authorities plan to repeat and synchronize the technology through other developments championed under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This model is being applied in all the 14 new cities that are being established under a goal to integrate the various cities. Some experts also see the new capital being for a privileged elite in a country and government way to control the masses.
So, in the sense, why have this smart city? Well, I mean, if there is any concern in the future that people might gather in the new capital city to protest, and that the Egyptians want to have another way to deter those kind of demonstrations and or to identify who might participate, this will help them.
A network of at least 6,000 cameras will monitor activity on every street, tracking pedestrians and vehicles to regulate traffic and report suspicious activity. Officials say surveillance technology will be aimed at detecting crime and enhancing safety, and that data will be protected by Egyptian law and international standards. Nonetheless, Egypt has witnessed a sweeping crackdown on dissent under Sisi, enforced by measures including controls on internet activity. We'll be right back after a short break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Time now for some commercial updates. Shares in the Asia Pacific are trading mixed as Australia reported a higher than expected trade surplus in July. Soft American jobs data also fueled optimism. The Federal Reserve might feel less pressure to wind down the stimulus. Mainland China's Shanghai Composite was up by more than 0.5%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan gained over 0.25%. South Korea's Kospi dipped close to 1%, leading the regional losses. Australia's ASX 200 also shed more than 0.5%. Hong Kong Hang Seng was down just marginally. Now, for all the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.